we have really a very interesting topic today, and that is a topic that very popular and very much discussed for many thousands of years. That's the story of Bat Sheva and David. I guess the storyline is sort of known to all of us, and we'll get to all of the details in due course. But I wanted to have a little bit of an introduction to understand the time, to understand David, to understand the people, to understand the whole thing, because it's very one of the many things that is widely misunderstood and misused very much in a very rude way. So we're gonna sort of straighten it out, God willing, in a nice way. So here goes. The story is that the book of Shmuel. The book of Shmuel is there's someone who's typing. Let me just see if I can stop the typing. All right. Okay. Yeah.
Sorry.
No, that's okay. No problem. All right. So the story goes that the book of the second book of Shmuel has several sections. The first section of it is right after Shaul was killed, and this is the ascent to power of David. The whole process of how he got where he got, to become the king of all the Jews. That took a few chapters. And then we have a few chapters discussing the big wars, discussing the expansion of the borders, discussing the whole expansion of the Jewish state, and with it, the more we expanded, the better off it was inside. The state became very organized. We had everything we needed. David was able to set it up in such a way that it's really the economy functioned, there was security, etc. And now we are going into another phase of David's life, or another phase of the book, rather, and that is all of the trembles and the squeaks and the issues, the problems that inflicted the house of David. And those problems, they became worse and worse problems. But the point is that David HaMelech passed them with flying colors, and at the end of those challenges, he came up much stronger and much more popular, and much more effective as our king of all kings, King David forever, David Melech Israel Chai V'Kayam. So we are in the verge of being thrown into the first of those challenges, and that is the story of Bat Sheva. Just to mention, there were three others, and some of them are very connected. The first one is the whole story of Bat Sheva is very much related to the heirs, to the heir to the throne, who is going to succeed David HaMelech. Who is going to be next in line? David HaMelech at this point had many children, had many wives, had many children. There were plenty of candidates, except that none of them fit the bill. None of them was able to be a king. David HaMelech knew his kids. He was a prophet. He was able to look in people's souls. He's not a regular dude like you and I, And he knew that none of those children, some of them are better, some of them are not so good, but they're not king material. So he was still looking for a king, and in his rush to find the right woman to have the next child with her, the king, the child that will succeed him on the throne, he was led to this problem with Bat Sheva, which is a problem, but he overcame it. And then there was, once the people around him understood what's going on, that he's actually looking for an heir. So the other kids weren't happy, and they said, hello, what about me? Well, it's a chopped liver? So a whole bunch of those guys started challenges from within. So the challenge number 2 was Amnon. He was next in line based on his age, and he started acting in a disgusting way, and he actually had a sexual relationship with one of his half sisters. We'll learn about that as well. Then the brother of the half sister is Avshalom, who is the younger child, and he took revenge and killed Amnon. That was challenge number 3. We'll talk about that at length as well. All of those things, David HaMelech really were bumps, but were not extraordinary bumps at the time. There was bumps, for many years to come that resulted from it, but a lot of repercussions resulted from it. But at the time, it was a problem, but not something that really shook his throne in a serious way. And then the 4th one is Avshalom actually trying to throw David HaMelech off the seat of the throne and take over while David HaMelech is alive. And he had the help of a gentleman called Achitophel, which we will meet officially in the book, in the text, in a couple of chapters, but we will have a preview about him today. Surprise, who he was. Surprise, surprise, you will see. So that's what's happening, or what's about to happen to the house of David. A lot of challenges from outside and from within, mainly from within. The next thing that happened is that a year ago, there was a campaign of the Ammonites. If you recall, the king of the Ammonites passed away. David HaMelech was nice and sent a mission to Menachem Ovel, basically, for the Shiva, to the Ammonites to say that he's sorry for the loss of the father. And the Ammonites treated them in a disgusting way. They took the mission and they shamed them in a public way. They shaved off of their beard. They took their clothes, they cut their clothes down so they don't have anything to cover their things, and they send them on their way. Now David HaMelech, smart politician, was waiting for them to either change their mind, repent, come back and say, I'm sorry, and also find the right opportunity, because they were ready for him to snap right away. And a smart politician, a smart general would not just do what the enemy is expecting them to do. So he waited a whole year before he answered that challenge. In the meantime, the Ammonites hired help. They hired the Aramites to help them attack the Jewish people again. And we won that war. But we didn't attack the Ammonites. We just separated them from the Aramaic army, and then we beat the Aramaic army. The Aram started a war with us to take revenge. The cycle of violence, right? To take revenge over the fact that we beat them up when they were helping Ammon, and we beat them up again. And then they basically submitted and became, our slaves, and they made a forced peace. So now it's time for a year passed by. David HaMelech was busy with other wars related to the Ammonite war, but now it's time to take revenge of the Ammonites. So that's where we find ourselves right now. Vayili tshuvat hashana, a whole year passed by. Le'etzet hamelachim. Now it's a word. It's written as kings, but it's one second. It's written as king, but it's. I'm sorry. One second. I have to check which way it's written and which way it's said. So it's written one way. It's in red and another way. And why can I find it? I don't know. But it's read melachim as kings, but it's written with an extra aleph, as you see here. It's written with an extra aleph as angels. Why? What's the angels here? The etzat melachim. So we have here a little bit of a lot of explanations to narrow down the exact time of year that everything happened. Because as we'll see, it matters very, very much to the story of Bat Sheva when everything happened. Counting down to the days. So the rabbis are telling us that right after Pesach, on Chafhei Nisan, right after Pesach, 3 days after Pesach, a word got out from the king, from David, that we need the army, that we're going to war. On Zayin Sivan, a day after Shavuos, the war they gathered, all of the people gathered the army gathered, and they waited around the city of Ammon for 3 months and a little bit until the end of Elul, the end of the year, Chavdaled Elul, I think, Chavdaled Elul, and then the war actually started. So there was a siege that took time from a day after Shavuos till 5 days, or 5 or 6 days, 5 days before Rosh Hashanah. And those dates are very, very exact, but we know exactly when it happened. It happened on the 24th year to David HaMelech's being a king. So he has 16 more years, right, in him? Yeah, 16 more years, or 15 more years, depending, according to whom. But this is where we are right now. So now, why are we saying Letzet Malachim? There are two things here. Kings are usually choosing the time to go to war. Kings are the ones that are initiating war, right? So they're always choosing the time to go to war, and most of the time, even in this day and age, wars are started in the summer. Why? Because it's comfortable weather. You can move people around, you can have surprise attacks, without being worried for winter and cold weather. The supply chain is better, In those days, it was an agricultural society. So if you went where you went at the right time of year, you had bread, you had bread from the locals as you were taking over fields. You had food for the soldiers. So Le'etzat HaMelachim, it's around the time of Shavuos. That's when it's nice outside. It's a good time for a war. 6-day war happened that day, etc. Vaishlach David et Yoav ve'et avadav imo ve'et kol Israel. So David HaMelech also chooses that time. Now, why does it say Malachim with an Aleph? Because what do we have in Elul, right before Rosh Hashanah? Before Rosh Hashanah, we are praying to Hashem to forgive us, right? And we are trying to rally all of the angels, all of the Malachim, the angels, to help us. So we started in the summer. 3 months later, right before Rosh Hashanah, this is when the things heated up. So it's Melachim, meaning kings, but it's also malachim to signify what's happening in Elul, where we asking the malachim, the angels, to take our prayers to Hashem. So that's the time of year. So what does David do? David feels very comfortable. He feels very comfortable in his power. He feels comfortable at home. He feels comfortable that the army can take care of it. So he sends Yoav, which is his general, right? His cousin, his nephew, and all of his servants, Imo, and all of the Jewish army, the Kol Israel, Vayashchitu et bnei Ammon, and they're basically creating a siege by destroying the food supply for that city. If you recall from last time, Rabat Ammon, which is the capital of the capital city of the Ammonites, was a very fortified city, had big walls. So they needed a supply chain to get in and out of the city. When you destroy around all of the supply chain, all of the trees, everything, they don't have what to eat. So that's where the siege started. Vayatsuru al Rabbah, and they basically created they devastated it, and they besieged Rabbah, which is Rabat Ammon, which is that city, that capital city. What happens with David? David Yeshev Yerushalayim. David HaMelech, unlike his previous ways, he was a warrior. He killed Goliath and many other people thereafter. He was not a wimp. But here he's sitting at home, and he's being criticized for it. He's being criticized. You should be with the people where they fight. And part of the problem that led to what happened with Bat Sheva is the fact that he stayed home behind. That was part of the problem. That was also part of the solution, why it was fixed somehow. It's all related to that war. And we will see that we sort of, after this verse, we pausing to start the whole story of Bat Sheva. We will continue the war in 10 verses, 12 verses. We're going to continue the war. So it's really smack in the middle of the war. And why does he stay behind? Because it's already 24 years that he's a king. He's not a young dude anymore. He's 56 years of age. Those days, it's it's a nice age. David HaMelech was alive until he's 70, right? So he felt that it's time to create to have an heir. He needs to raise him. He cannot give birth to an heir and then die and expect that 2-year-old to become a king. He needs to be a substantial age, the next in line. Indeed, Shlomo ended up being 12 when he took over. 12 is not he's not an old guy. So David HaMelech felt the fire, so to speak, under him, and was really waiting to be able to find the right person. So that's one of the reasons that he stayed behind. All right, now before we continue, I want to give you a little bit of an introduction to the people that we're going to be discussing here. Okay, first and foremost is Madame Bat Sheva. Okay, so who was Bat Sheva? And who was her husband? Uriah Hitti, right? So who was Bat Sheva and who was her husband? So Bat Sheva was the granddaughter of Achitophel. Remember in the beginning we mentioned Achitophel. She was the granddaughter of Achitophel. Who was Achitophel? Achitophel was a very, very, very smart man. So smart that David HaMelech called him his rabbi. He taught him Torah. He was very, very knowledgeable, very scholarly, very, high, an important rabbi in knowledge-wise. Problem is, he had a rotten personality, right? And a person needed to live, a life of a normal person in those days was 70 years. He didn't even get half of it. He, at the age of 33, at the ripe age of 33, he committed suicide. He was very, very wise. He started as David's rabbi. He became David's friend because David advanced in his knowledge of Torah. And then later in life, he became his student. David HaMelech actually exceeded his wisdom. Now, he was one of the advisors. Achitophel was around, was part of the royal apparatus, and he was an advisor. He was an advisor that double-crossed David HaMelech. After the story of Bat Sheva, because Bat Sheva was his granddaughter, right? So, granddaughter or great-granddaughter? Granddaughter, I think. Great-granddaughter. And she was a great-granddaughter. And she was, after the story of Bat Sheva, Achitophel felt that he wants to, because he had, family, royal family, family in the royal house, that he can work himself into taking over David's spot on account of Bat Sheva being there. So he crossed David and he changed sides and he went with Avshalom, the son of David. We will see this whole story is going to be told in great detail, but later on. But the bottom line is that Achitophel went with Avshalom, gave him all kinds of advice on how to overcome David HaMelech, and he wanted him to throw David HaMelech off the throne, and then because he had so much Torah knowledge, he planned to frame Avshalom and get rid of Avshalom and then take over. So it was a whole plan of his. He saw several steps ahead, except that David HaMelech was countering it, and we will see with another advisor. And when he saw that his plan was foiled, he was devastated, went home, committed suicide. That's a very good solution. Committed suicide and got off the scene at the age of 33. Caused a lot of trouble until then. But he produced Bat Sheva. Bat Sheva was living in the area because she was close to, she was the great-granddaughter of the advisor. So they all lived around there, around David HaMelech. It was a small town in those days. In our sizes of cities today, it was a small town. So it was really close. She really lived close. She was at that age, at 6 years of age, a little kid, 6 years of age. She was very developed. She was very. It says that she was bigger. She looked much bigger than her age, but she was 6 years of age, and it's proven because Achitophel was 33 at the time that when he killed himself. Shlomo was 8, so they're making the whole calculation of how she could have been just that age, because you needed the generations, right? You needed the son, and then you needed her, and then so you needed Shlomo. You needed 3 generations to grow to 8 years old. So it turns out that she was 6 in this time. What was the custom in those days? Now, Bat Sheva, just so you all know, you are very familiar with her qualities. Each and every one of us is praising Bat Sheva once a week at least. Because Eshet Chayil, on Shabbos, right before Kiddush, Eshet Chayil Mi'imtza, that is being told. This is the last perek of Proverbs, and Shlomo HaMelech wrote it, and he wrote it in honor of his mother, Bat Sheva. So, there is all of the women, all of the Jewish women, all time were praised by their husbands and family members to be, or aspire to be like Bat Sheva. So Bat Sheva was a very special, very, very special person. And David HaMelech saw it, and he saw also into her soul, and he saw that from the Medrash is saying that from Sheshet Yemei Bereshit, from the 6 days of creation, this woman, this soul that went into Bat Sheva was destined to marry David HaMelech, and the product of that marriage was destined to be Mashiach. And he knew it. He knew that Mashiach is going to come from that from that union. And he was very anxious because he was looking for that woman for years and years and years. And he married this one and that one and that one, the other one, all very good quality women, and was hoping that she's the one, but none of them were the one. And then he saw her and he knew that she is the one, and indeed she was the one, and we will see in a second what happened the way it happened, why it happened that way. So that is Bat Sheva. Now let's understand a little bit her husband, Uriah Hitti. Now, 6 years old, husband, red flag, right? What's going on here? So let's first of all talk about Uriah Hitti, and then we'll see how they got together and all of that. Who was Uriah Hitti? We mentioned him already, a long time ago. Uriah Hitti was the Kadi, the helper who carried all the weapons of our friend Goliath. He was the Kadi of Goliath. And he carried he was there, and he carried some of his weapons. And when Goliath died, when David HaMelech was able with the slingshot to stick a stone through his armor, through his head, through his helmet, and penetrate the helmet and penetrate the forehead and kill the man, he wanted to behead Goliath. He wanted to separate the head from the body and be able to show everyone that this is it, it's over. It's not just, he's not just resting. So David HaMelech was trying to take Goliath's sword out of the case and use his sword to behead him. But the sword was a very heavy, number one, but it was also designed in such a way that it was not easy to take it out of the case. You needed to press here and press there. It was a special sword that was locked into place. So David HaMelech needed help. And who was there? The person who was carrying it, Mr. Uriah, was willing to offer help. But Uriah saw the demise of Goliath, and he decided that he wants to join the Am Israel. He wanted to join the Jewish people. He started the process of conversion later on, but on the spot, he was asking David to promise. He said, I'm going to give you the key. I'm going to let you open this sword and do whatever you need to do, but you take care of me and help me, keep me alive, number one, and help me here. So David HaMelech promised him. And Uriah Hitti turned out to be he converted and became a ger. And because David HaMelech promised him, that help, and which maybe he shouldn't have. I'm not, some people say he shouldn't have. He ended up being in the mix with this big test that David HaMelech went through with Bat Sheva. So that's Mr. Uriah Hitti. He became, he grew he was a Kadi for Goliath. So he wasn't a small man. He was a big husky guy. He was one of the Giborim, one of the heroes of the army of David HaMelech. Now, what happened is that in those days, it was custom to marry young, and it was custom to marry young and not right away have a relationship, meaning you make an agreement with the father, with the family, and you marry the child, and then you let the child grow, and then you cement the relationship. So that's what happened with Uriah Hitti. He agreed to marry Bat Sheva, but they never had a relationship. They never had a sexual relationship. They were never together. because she was young. And so that's right away put a whole different, slant and a different discussion, because she wasn't she was his wife before, but she wasn't really a wife yet. Now, another thing that we need to take into account, and again, this is something that we mentioned several times in the past, is that there was the custom in those days to make sure that when soldiers don't show up back from a war, that the woman, the wife, does not stay aguna, does not stay stuck in a marriage that doesn't have any hope because the husband died. In those days, until very recently in wars, people disappear in wars and they don't come back. You don't know where they are. And what happens to the wife? She stayed in aguna. So they used to give a get. They arranged to give a get. So when a soldier would go to war, they would give a get to the woman, conditional one. And if I'm not coming back, that will be a get. So from now, you're not my wife anymore. And so most of them had this kind of a get, a conditional get. Yishai, the father of David HaMelech, took it a step further and say it's not enough to have a conditional get, because that's sort of make-believe, It's not a real get, and it can cause a real problem. So he insists that they're going to give a real get, a full get, and basically the woman will be a divorcee, a divorced woman, and then they will, when the husband comes back, in most 99.99% of the time, they'll get together again and will remarry. A machzir grushato, someone who take back his divorced wife, remarry her. It's a mitzvah in and of itself. It's good, and that's what happened. Now, if you recall, how did David HaMelech altogether arrived at the war with Goliath? What happened over there? What happened was David HaMelech was the black sheep in his family, and he was when the three older brother went to war. He was sent with the sheep. You go and work with the goats, and just stay out of trouble. But because it was a war in a hurry with the Philistines, the brothers that went to the war didn't get a chance to give a get to their wives, and Yishai didn't like it. So he sends David HaMelech with food and with food for them and food for the commander, but with a specific instruction: get a get from them for all of their wives. So it's God forbid something happens, they shouldn't be left hanging. That's how David HaMelech arrived at the scene of the war altogether, and he saw what's going on over there, and he decided to take action. But he was sent to get the get from those brothers. What happened with Uriah Hitti and then when he became a king, he instituted this strict ruling that his father set to do, to actually give a get to a woman. So when the hero would go out to a war, when a soldier will go out to a war, he will divorce before he leaves. When he comes back, he will remarry. Now, there is, and this is why the dates that we were mentioning were very important, because what happens is, when a woman divorces her husband, she is not allowed to remarry for 3 months, because you don't want to mix to not know who the child was, because if she happened to be pregnant when she gave birth, when she was divorced and nobody saw it, and then she gave birth 7 months later, you wouldn't know if it's 7 months to the second one or 9 months to the first one, you wouldn't know. So the rabbis, and this is working, this is the rule till this very day. After a divorce, a woman has to wait 3 months in order to remarry. What happened in our situation? Uriah went to war on Zayin Sivan, as we said. That's when they get her and they went to war. And at that point she was divorced. Bat Sheva was divorced. David HaMelech came and had a relationship with her more than 3 months later in Chavdaled Elul. This is 2 weeks, 3 months and 2 weeks, and a little more than 2 weeks from the time that she got a get. So she was totally divorced from Uriah at that time. Not only she was divorced from Uriah, it was 3 months more since the divorce. Not only 3 months more, she never had a relationship with that man. She basically was a virgin at that point. So David HaMelech did absolutely, halachically nothing wrong. It looked awful. Everybody agrees that it's not the right thing, and he was punished for the timing. He was punished very, very, very harshly. And one of the main things that he was punished is that it's written. He was begging the prophets, the prophet Natan and the prophet Gad, who were authoring the book of Shmuel, Bet, right? The second book of Shmuel after the death of Shaul, after the death of Shmuel, who wrote the first section of almost most of the first book of Shmuel. After that, Natan HaNavi wrote it, and he admitted it. He wrote it in. He put it into print. And David HaMelech was begging him, please don't, because he knew that this is forever going to be a topic. It's forever going to be a scandal, the ultimate scandal, the eternal scandal. And he didn't want it. But because it was so important to show people what not to do, and to show people how you can climb out of such a big doo-doo, such a big problem, they wrote it in. So that is basically the intro of all the pieces. Let's go in and see a couple of verses, and then we'll continue again next time with more details. Vayilet Erev. So you know what? One more intro, and that is, I think, the best one of them. David HaMelech felt so good about what is going on with Am Yisrael, with the nation, with the Jewish people at the time, and he felt that this is the time for Mashiach to come. And here he felt that it's imminent, and he has the power to do it. There are 4 legs to that car that's called, the Jewish people. And the 4 legs are, one of them is Avraham, Yitzchak, and Yaakov. Right? Those are the 3 legs of the chariot, of the Merkava, of the table, of the nation. But there is a 4th leg. And he felt that he can be the 4th leg. And he is the 4th leg. Those are the Avraham, Yitzchak, Yaakov, and David. However, when we daven Shmoneh Esrei, we said Elokei Avraham, Elokei Yitzchak, Elokei Yaakov. We don't say also Elokei David. Why? So David HaMelech felt that maybe it's time to change that. Maybe it's time to include him as well as part of this, because we are about to have Mashiach. So God told him, listen, they went through a lot of tests. Avraham, Yitzchak, and Yaakov went through a lot of tests. Tests that were meant to be general tests, not individual tests. You also went through tests, but they were personal tests that has to do with you, with yourself, not with you didn't. The tests that they passed basically gave us the DNA of who we are. David HaMelech was not the father physically of all the Jews, so whatever test he withstood did not give us, the public DNA of the Jewish people. So it's not the same test. So David HaMelech told God, "Shafteni na, give me the test. I'll show you. I can withstand it." And this is the problem. This is when the problem started. That God right away that day, He gave him the test. and the test was sexual in nature, and he changed the day and night. All night he didn't go to sleep. He was learning, he was studying, and then he was resting around noon. Again, to switch the biological clock. So whenever there are some temptations, which is usually at night, it's not gonna be him. So he woke up from his afternoon nap, and he was walking around on the roof of his house. Now, what's the good part here? The good part here is what happened with the test. Let's take, for example, the test of Akedat Yitzchak, the ultimate test of Avraham Avinu. Right? Avraham Avinu was told, take your son and slaughter your son, right? The son that you got when you were 100 years old, the son, right? The son that you got when the son that I promised you, Hashem said, that he's going to be your heir, he's going to take over. That son, you're going to have to slaughter now. So the logic doesn't work here. How is my son that's going to take over? I'm going to slaughter. So how is he going to take over? How is the generations going to continue? How am I going to have children like this, like the stars in the sky? If the one son that I have, I'm going to slaughter with my own hands. The logic didn't work. But what did Avraham Avinu do? What Avraham Avinu does is he does not pay attention to the disturbances, and if God told him to do something, he does. Total submission to God. Total and utter, I'm yours 100%. The same thing happened here, except that David HaMelech wasn't able to pass that test. He saw that woman is the right one. He saw that the union between them is going to yield Mashiach. But there was a problem. She's married, or she's not really married, but she's tied to another man, to another person. So how can that be? And instead of just going with the halakha and saying God will find a way for all of it to work out, God will find a way for this whole situation to resolve himself. He decided to resolve it himself and make all the logical part work together. And that's the criticism that the rabbis have on David HaMelech. That the timing was not exactly the right one, and he didn't go with, he didn't withstand the test. Now, David HaMelech, for the rest of his life, which was 16 years afterwards, dedicated his life for tshuva, and with the power of tshuva, he was able to expunge all of the problems and become stronger and much more, righteous, much bigger, much stronger than what he was before. But Mashiach did not come in his time. And he was plagued with a lot of internal problems, and all of his life and all of his, for the rest of time, the house of David suffered tremendous problems because Mashiach didn't come then. That son, just so you know, he, after having a relationship with the Bat Sheva, a child was born, and that child died and lived for 7 days. For a week, and then he died. That Mashiach guy lived for 7 days and then died. And, and they didn't come. He didn't grow up to come. And then Shlomo HaMelech was the second child, and she had Shlomo HaMelech when she was 8. And Shlomo HaMelech did become a king, but he wasn't destined to be the ultimate Mashiach, as we know. Anyway, but David HaMelech was trying to do whatever he can to bring Mashiach, whatever he can to benefit the people of Israel, and the timing was just not right. And as we know from the history of David HaMelech, David HaMelech comes from a situation which was very funny, from the union of Yehuda and Tamar. Right? We know the story of Yehuda and Tamar. She was married, both of his children. They died. He didn't want to give her the third child. He ended up having a relationship with her as if she's was posing as a prostitute. Then we have in David HaMelech lineage also Ruth, who came from the Moabites. Nothing was easy. Everything that has to do with David HaMelech was not easy. Not his history, not his upbringing, not his he was the black sheep in the family. Then he rose to power with with one slingshot against Goliath and got the king's daughter, just for the king to chase him for 3 years, try to kill him, 2.5 years. I mean, everything about David HaMelech was difficult, and this too. Because that's the whole idea. I mean, the whole idea is, as we know, nothing is easy these days. Nothing easy, it's not meant to be easy. Anyway, did the rabbi say that he canceled this year today? Is that, do we know?